She saw the curtains part. The creature stared down at her with bulging yellow eyes. What did it want from her? She Made a Monster: How Mary Shelley Created Frankenstein by Lynn Fulton, illustrated by Felicita Sala. 200 years ago, on a wild, stormy night, in a beautiful house off the shores of Lake Geneva in Switzerland, a young woman named Mary sat at her dressing table. She and her friends were staying in the house for the season, visiting Lord Byron, the famous English poet. Mary could hear the others still talking downstairs while she brushed her hair by candlelight, thinking of stories she'd read, stories she'd heard, stories she wanted to tell. For Mary wanted to become a writer. Her dear friend Percy Shelley, who would soon be her husband, was a poet, and Mary herself came from a family of writers. All around her, she felt the power of words, and she hoped that someday she too would write something important, something that would hit the world like a bolt of lightning splitting the night sky. But for now, she only wanted to write a ghost story. It had all begun when the friends had read aloud from a book of frightening tales, entertaining each other through the rainy days and nights. Lord Byron had declared,
"We should each write a ghost story. In a week, we will see who has written the best one."
The week would be up tomorrow. The men had already finished their stories. Tales of bloodthirsty vampires and vengeful ghosts.
Of course, Byron is sure the best one will be his.
Mary thought now.
He is an excellent poet after all, but so arrogant.
Yet, try as he might, Mary had found no way to begin her story. The clock struck midnight. Mary put down her hairbrush and tiptoed into the hall. Over the howling wind, she could hear her friends talking about the latest scientific experiments, their favorite topic. Percy's voice thundered up the stairs.
"Electricity.
He was saying.
Galvani used it to make a dead frog kick its legs."
Dashing back to her room, Mary felt a shiver creep over her. She remembered hearing as a young girl about an even more ghastly experiment. A scientist made a corpse move using electricity. Mary had shuddered as she listened, clinging to her father's leg. She had been only 6 years old. To erase that terrible image from her mind, Mary opened her locket and looked at the tiny portraits of her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft. She died when Mary was a baby. As a girl, Mary learned the alphabet by tracing the letters on her mother's tombstone. When she was older, she read everything her mother had written, stirring words about democracy and the rights of women, words that sparked courage and inspiration in many, but anger and outrage in many others.
"Women, the equals of men! What a monstrous thought!"
People had said about her mother's ideas, and for Mary Wollstonecraft to write them was even more monstrous. Women were not supposed to have ideas of their own, let alone publish them. Now Mary snapped her locket shut. She wanted to prove that her mother was right. A woman's writing could be just as important as a man's. Downstairs, the men's voices grew louder and more excited.
"To give life to lifeless matter will be the ultimate triumph."
Man will conquer nature and make her give up the secret.
Mary shook her head as she listened.
Nature might have very good reason for keeping her secrets.
She thought.
Besides, what would happen to that lifeless matter once someone had given it life?
The men did not seem to care. They only asked if something could be done, never if it should. Thunder rumbled in distance, and the rain beat harder against the window. Mary watched the wax drip down her candle. Now she could hear the others saying good night and stepping softly up the stairs. She thought of ghosts and vampires. She thought of monsters. She thought of loneliness. The night was passing, and she still didn't have a story. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, and Mary jumped as her reflection peered back at her from the mirror, pale and strange, like something dead restored to life.
Wouldn't it be terrifying to see such a creature?
She mused.
Or perhaps more terrifying to be such a creature?
Mary got into bed and stared up into the darkness. The house by the lake was still. The wind shrieked over the eaves, but only Mary was awake to hear it. She let the booming thunder fill her head. She closed her eyes to the bursts of lightning, but she did not sleep. Instead, as if in a dream, she saw a huge form lying on a table. It was a man, yet not a man. It had a hideous, scared face. She saw a young student anxiously bending over the form with a candle. He had achieved his ambition. He had discovered nature's secret and given life to the creatures on the table. But now he was afraid. He did not know what to do. He dropped the candle, covered his face with his hands, and ran away, hoping the ember of life he had sparkled would die out. And suddenly, lying in her bed with the curtains shut, Mary felt as if she was the young creator. She felt as if she'd run to her room to cower under the sheets, trying not to think of the terrible things she'd created, trying not to think of it coming to find her. She trembled as she imagined a hand, huge, gray, and twisted, appearing through the bed curtains. She saw the curtains part. The creature stared down at her with bulging yellow eyes. What did it want from her? Mary gasped and sat up in bed. She ripped open the curtains and recognized her own room in the moonlight. All was familiar and ordinary. There was no monsters. There was only her imagination. Her heart pounded, but she was happy. She had found her story. The end.